Hi, everyone. On this episode, we're talking about how there's more than one way to bake a cake. Nope. There's more than one way to cook an egg. There's more than one way to knit a sweater. There's more than one way. Oh, shit. On this episode, we're talking about how there's more than one way to shear a sheep. There's more than one way to shake a carbuncle. Sean, what are these notes? There's more than one way to skin a monster on this episode of the Vanguard Chronicles. Welcome, everyone, to the Vanguard Chronicles podcast, where we have an ongoing conversation into the creative process behind the Vanguard, our monthly crowdsourced D&D campaign of interconnected one-shots. As always, I'm one of the hosts and dungeon master of the Vanguard, Nathan, also known as Spark Ascendant, and I'm joined yet again by my co-host and fellow Vanguard DM, Sean, also known as General Grom. How's it going today, General?
It's going well, Nathan. It's good to see you. It's been a while since we recorded the last one, so it's always nice to see you. And remember, for everyone out there, please please subscribe, and hit the notification so you know when we drop our next episode. We've been trying to be consistent on when they drop, but it's always good to have a notification.
And guaranteed, we read every single comment that does come through, too.
Yes, we do.
Especially for the question of the episode, too. But today, on this episode, boy, I'm not going to say we're excited, because I say that every time, but I will say we definitely, our show notes went from like, oh, how do we talk about this topic, to just exploding with things we want to discuss today. Because today we're talking about the process of how we go about reskinning monsters, or as we like to call it, some of the easy ways of how to cheat at Homebrew. But before we do that, actually, Sean, you have a couple things to share with the people about our charity endeavors.
Well, we've joined forces with a charity called extralife.org. They support the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia through the Children's Miracle Network. We have a 50-50 raffle at every one of our events and a themed beer tap called Stonehard Ale. And the proceeds from that go directly to help children and their families have a sense of normalcy that they don't normally have during treatment. And it's something that I think we take for granted. We started the year with a goal of $1,000, and I am so happy and thrilled to say and announce that we have smashed that goal. And I believe we can aim higher. We are going to shoot for 2,000 by the end of the year. I think that's within our reach with your help. How do you help? Well, it's pretty simple. Go to the QR screen code and scan it on the screen. Also, go to the link in the description. You'll get more info. You can join our team. Every little bit really helps. It really, really does. And we will be eternally grateful. We've also partnered with Golden Alchemy Crafts to bring you something really special, I think. Exclusive dice trays inspired by the houses of the Vanguard. These are not just ordinary trays. They're really high quality. They're laser engraved with the logo in the middle. They're built to last. Grab yours and just know that every purchase supports our Extra Life team. We're rolling out something also, brand new t-shirts, emblazoned with a really, really cool design that we're all super happy about. Just screams Vanguard. The color is custom, and they're available in all kinds of sizes. Again, proceeds go directly to the charity. And lastly, something we're super thrilled about that I really am really thrilled about to announce that we have made a new alliance with Misty Mountain Gaming, the masters of some premium tabletop gear. They've given us a special code that you can use at checkout. Forget this, 10% off store-wide. That's awesome. The code is Vanguard, and it is on the screen. And not only will you gear up with some of the best RPG stuff out there, proceeds from your purchase go directly to help the charity. Everything we do is geared for this, so it really matters. So just, help rally to the cause and spread the word of what the Vanguard is doing.
You know, Sean, I'm not going to lie. This might be very selfish of me, but one of the coolest things about this process, and I think it's as cool of anyone who does a creative endeavor like this, is having merchandise. And like now we've got the Golden Alchemy Crafts dice tray.
Yeah.
We've got the t-shirts. I'm slowly building a pile of Vanguard swag, and I really like it. It's really cool, and it's also awesome that it's going to help support Chop.
Absolutely. I think it's the merch as we started to develop it, and the reasons why we wanted to do it is to give something back again to the people that engage themselves in our games and really help us out and give and make a path to help the charity too. Because I love the t-shirt design. It took a while to get to it, but it's really sick, and I'm really pleased with it.
Certainly I am too. But with that out of the way, I think it's time we dig into the topic because truly, I'm looking at our show notes right now, and just there's so much to talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely. The reskinning monsters is a trick, or it's a tool that all DMs, much like the other tools that we've been kind of adding in our tool belt and our toolbox, uh, be able to reskin or take a somewhat not as interesting monster or a monster you've used over and over again and try to, tweak it or bump it up a bit, or give it some a different life, so to speak.
Yeah, it really is, and I think it's an underrated skill too, because I think a lot of people jump right away to creating something brand new. But specifically, what we're looking at today that I think is so important is the idea of taking an existing monster and tweaking it and changing it so that it fits the purposes of what you need to do in your given campaign. And I think what a lot of people will find, especially new DMs who might want to say, "Oh no, I want to create entirely brand new," is a lot of the same principles you will find in creating a brand new monster will apply when you're reskinning one. And so you can really find those skills transfer, and it's a good stepping stone.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we should kind of, and we'll get deeper into it, and we'll show you some examples later. So definitely stay tuned. But let's, we can kind of talk about what do we mean by reskinning, and I think I can get into a little bit from the idea thematically that you change a monster or a creature to fit the scale or fit the scope of what your story is about, and you can make thematic changes simply by the way you re-describe the same creature and change your description patterns. That it may be a banshee, let's use that as an example, but if you describe it slightly different and give it maybe a different look, your players won't feel as predictable. It's been the same thing over and over again.
Right. Because, I might not have ogres living nearby to somebody, but I might have some other kind of big, lumbering, hulking, dumb guy who's not the strongest big dude, but is definitely larger than average, very dangerous. And dang, like, even though ogres thematically and lore wise don't fit my setting, ogres, conceptually, they kind of do.
Right, by their basic concept of just being a large hulking creature, that's a great starting point. It's like your basis, but then you can kind of push the next level of them. I mean, there's a million different ways you can do it to give them some other sense of dynamic, a different weapon or something they wouldn't normally use, to add that just a flair to them. I mean, some of it is you just want to have your monsters have some flair, I think.
Even monsters that might be part of the same team or organization, that's another area where I think thematically you might want to make some of these changes for it too.
Right, those changes are again not designed to trip your players up or try to, "Ooh, I got you." It's never really, and it should never be. And I can't stress this enough, that it never should feel like it's you as a DM against your players or your players against the DM, because that starts to lose the cohesive kind of collective storytelling element of the game that makes the
Mhm.
game fun. It should be, I want to create something or I want to put something in front of my players that'll make them feel challenged but not overwhelmed. Do you know what I mean?
Precisely. And especially, this is what we talk about, why it's so important to do that, because yeah, it's not just about, changing things and presenting them in a different way to your players that they might not be expecting from a thematic standpoint, but it's also doing it from a mechanical standpoint. And again, it's not to make it so that, oh, hey, you aren't expecting this, ha ha ha, you'll die. But it's more because it's another way you can make the game interesting, not just from a story perspective, but from the actual gameplay perspective, right? Suddenly,
Yeah.
a basic example is, the twist you always have when you have a troll, for players who've never worked with a troll that has its health regen ability. If I put that health regen ability on some other kind of creature that's not a troll, just as a basic idea there, that adding that mechanic of the health regen changes the dynamics of the fight, still has a surprise of the troll effect without my players actually knowing that it has that on there, and that creates, again, that dynamic of the unknown, which is a really cool approach to it.
Yes, but it also creates, and this is something I just actually kind of thought of, it for those metagamers, and you have, it happens. It is, you can't avoid it. I don't care who you are. If you read any of this stuff, you know stuff, or you've played long enough, you know things about monsters, and all of a sudden, hey, that thing doesn't have that, and that's that metagaming borderline you have to try to play with. And if you have some trust between you and your players are not going to worry about that. But that's something you have to concern yourself with, that you don't want to do. Oh, this is, they see it as exactly a troll, and it doesn't
Right.
have the regen ability, or I see it as a hill giant with regen ability. Well, they don't have that, and then your players feel like he's just cheating us, or you don't want to do that. That's really a fine line that you have to kind of skirt, I think.
Or conversely, for players who are not familiar, and sorry to your DMs that we're going to spoil this. So trolls regenerate health every turn unless they've taken fire damage. That's a common thing.
Right.
Another going the opposite direction, you can have a troll who regens health no matter what damage he's taken, or
Right.
unless he's taken ice damage or lightning damage. Like, these are small little things you can do that change not just the narrative flow because of the implications of why that occurs, but then again, it changes the actual gameplay experience of your players to create a much more memorable experience. It's not just, again, oh, okay, what page of the monster manual that,
Right.
I'm an avid fan, so I've been reading and I see all the stuff in. What page is it on? Oh, okay, cool, it's that.
Right.
It's weird. It's funny. Like, you say it's not about tripping up our players, and it's not mean spirited about tripping up our players,
Right.
but it kind of is about tripping up our players a little bit. But there's other
Well,
reasons for doing it too, though.
yeah, I again, I don't. You want to keep your players not like a little off guard is fine. I mean, from any story, as they don't know how it's going to unfold, that off guardness is what creates tension and builds up, making the fight a little bit more dynamic or a little more interesting. But I do agree with you that it has effects on balance. It has uh, all the way around, but knowing where you start, that's a great way. It's like using this idea of taking an existing creature that gives you a base level of this will work. If I do nothing else, it will be this, but it may come off or thematically a different way.
And also, like, sorry players, but it's not always about you. DMs are very busy, especially for our schedule with the Vanguard, planning out a brand new one shot to run every single month for a group of players that we don't know what to expect. We have kind of a rough idea of what their player levels will be, but I could have everywhere right now from like a level 3 to a level 7.
Mhm.
On top of that, because of the scale we tend to run our things at, I've got minis to paint, I got a map to pick out, I've got all this stuff to work on. We have our planning meetings. We do a lot for our particular production. And you know what? Instead of writing the stats for a new block, you know what? Sometimes reskinning is just easier
Yeah.
because I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I want to make a monster that is of a comparable difficulty to a target I'm going for. And so, you know what? I'm going to take a monster that already exists and I'm going to change its name. I'm going to change a couple teeny things about it here or there so that I retheme it, reskin in a whole new way without really having to do that much of the harder kind of nitty gritty, real mathematical work to bring it into a balancing line.
Yeah, true. When create a creature from scratch, like trying to pull out of, and there's some really good websites for that. I've used Monster Shuffler for
Yep.
just producing the stats. It's great for digging through, the different abilities and adding abilities, and it'll allow you to kind of, oh, that'll work, and throw it in there, and it keeps track of it. I like that website quite a bit when it comes to creating monsters and reskinning them, because you can start with this and then tweak over it and go pull things out of that list. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is you want to make sure that your creature fits your theme and your players are going to enjoy it, because it is, you don't want a boring fight. You don't want it over in one round, unless you do. Sometimes that's okay too.
It's also incredibly useful because, I mean, I'll give you an example from just a couple months ago. So a common thing that we have is a couple of myself and our producer Ryan, and soon to be you, spoiler alert, have a thing we do where we will have our we'll get a mini. We have a guy with a 3D printer who prints minis for us.
Right.
And so I'll pick a mini from some of our resources. I'll have our 3D printer guy print it, and I'll give it to Ryan, and I'll say, "Hey Ryan, paint this mini. It's yours now, and write a story with it." And he doesn't know what the mini is. He doesn't know what it is when he's getting it until he gets it. So he has about a month, depending if we already have plans, 2 months to come up with a unique story for that mini. And he'll do the same for me. And I'll say again, it's coming to you.
Apparently, I'm
Uh, but,
getting involved.
but the thing that we find is sometimes the challenge you have with that is there's not an existing stat block, right? There's the monster. Some of the minis very intentionally don't have a direct parallel. And
Right.
so an easy starting point, like one I've used, is a while ago he gave me this model that's like this giant hulking dude with spikes all over. It basically looked like Master Blaster from Mad Max, hence why we took to calling him the very mature Asster Blaster. But I'm gonna tell you right now, if I look at the monster manual, Volos, Mordenkainen's, Mythic Odysseys, Tomb of the Giants. Like, there's not Tomb of the Giants. That's I think it's a Dark Souls level. Big B's, I think is the guide to Giants.
Yep.
I'm proving I'm a fraud right now because I don't remember every D&D title. But I'll tell you right now, it does not have a stat block labeled Asster Blaster. I've gone through the table of contents. I've gone through the index. It doesn't exist. So for me, my choice with all our prep is I either write it from scratch, or I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you right now, use some of the exact tips that we have here. Glory of the Giants. Thank you, Ryan, our producer. I use some of the exact tips that we're about to present here and that we're describing to just take something that already exists, tweak it a little bit, and with relatively minimal effort, I have a cool, unique new monster that fits this cool mini that then creates a big moment on the table for my players.
Yeah, that's the kind of I always like that challenge, and to be able to take something that doesn't exist, like literally doesn't have anywhere, and then kind of find the monster that's closest to it, whether it's strength, hit points, size. I mean, something you can find that's parallel to it, and then build around that. It does, you're right. It saves you time. It makes it a little easier, and you don't feel as overwhelmed in your prep.
Because you don't always need to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah, you
and
don't.
and certainly not to keep things unique and interesting for your players, especially because I think we get so caught up as the DMs because, again, we have all the cards, we see everything, and we're just because you are using an existing monster, it doesn't mean that it needs to be stale, right? Goblins can still be really unique and interesting, and sometimes all it takes is a couple tweaks here or there to make, oh, it's goblins again, be like, oh, geez, like, oh, these goblins, well, this is something crazy.
Right, or oh, it's goblins again. That a lot of times depending on where your world is and how your world and your campaigns develop, they may be more prevalent. So yes, they're going to run into them more. But to figure out ways to make them change their dynamic a bit, add something that they wouldn't normally have, that makes them dynamic for your players. And I think we also should kind of get into, like, what do you need to do this? Like, what is actually needed to create and reskin monsters? Not really that much, to be honest with you.
Yeah, really. I mean, well, first off, well, Sean, hold on a minute. I remember what it's like to be a new DM, and, like, I mean, think back to when you started DMing. Like, do you have your form, like your permission slip, like your documented, like, you are a DM and thus allowed to take stat blocks as published by Lord Gods of Wizards of the Coast and tweet. Like, do you have your? I've got mine on my wall behind me, but the background's blocking it.
My legal certificate to affect. Yeah, no, I don't have one because you don't need one.
Yeah, you
It's
don't need permission.
it's not necessary.
There's
You don't need
no.
permission to this.
You are the DM. Gygax famously, like, changed and tweaked his stuff all of the time.
Yeah,
Some of the current writers, as Will mentioned, I believe, coming up. Actually, I'll go ahead and say, like, I think Chris Perkins specifically. It's either Chris Perkins or the other one has famously said that, like, the CR system is an element of just the core rules, not even the monsters, that has issues or is not necessarily the best designed or the most perfect thing because, right, they designed it. Every game after it comes out has way more play testers than it did in development. And so as a result, they even the creators of the game in its old form and its current form tweak and change things all of the time. And it's not because they're employees and thus it's in their contract.
Right.
It's also that, but it's
Wow.
specifically the thing that empowers them to do it is because they, as DMs, are running this game with their friends who trust them to run the game. That's it. That's the only permission you need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost kind of inherent in the game by its design. I think we all, as DMs, should have the ability to tweak any facet of the game to fit the way we want to play or the way our players will have the most fun. Everybody, there's no wrong way to do it. Okay, simple
Right.
put.
And, like, experience helps. Like, I won't lie. The more you DM, the more you take these leaps, and you'll see with some of these change, like, one thing, like, oh my god, like, you're really pushing boundaries here. But you'll find that you really don't. Experience will make it easier, but it's not needed. Especially, and this is the thing I harp on a lot, if you are with a good community of people, if the friends you are playing with at your table or at your local game store, any of them are the kind of people who, you say, hey, I'm trying something a little different, I hope you guys like it, I might have to roll something back, I might have to tweak something on the fly, right? You are helping them by you DMing, and if they are good people, they will appreciate, and you are doing it in good faith and not power tripping,
Right.
they will appreciate your effort and they will work with you because they will see the effort that you are trying to put into the great game experience, and they will want to aid and support that by just being supportive players. So truly, you don't, it's not that big a deal.
It's not, yeah, and you don't have to put a lot of pressure on yourself as a DM to always reskin monsters. You can stick with what you have, what's printed, and go with that. And again, a lot of those stat blocks in the monster manual and these books are like a guide. It's not,
Mhm.
you have weaker versions if you want them. You have stronger versions of them if you want to. You can adjust even just existing creatures if they're kind of metas as this is what the basis is, and then go from there. And I agree, it also should fit your story purpose too. You can't, you know, I'm going to put a creature in that has a breath weapon and would never have a breath weapon. If it doesn't fit your story purpose, then you're kind of just shoving things at your players randomly, and that also feels kind of disingenuous. I think to a certain degree, it feels like you didn't prep well enough. Like you're just making stuff up.
And I think really you just nailed it. The actual thing that you need is just kind of a vision, be it your story purpose or you maybe it's the encounter you're going on. The point is just some kind of vision of like what is the kind of story you want to tell? What is the kind of monster you need? Is it in the monster manual already? If not, then right, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Having that goal and that vision, so that way it's something that you can go towards to start the process.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have a vision for it. You have to kind of know why you're doing it. Like in the end, be able to go, this is why I'm doing it, and then stick to it. Just take your chances. Some of it is because you can't tell your players ahead of time, because what's the fun in that? So you want to be able to surprise them or bring it up to the table. Like you said, it's one of the easiest things to do is go, I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to adapt to this. So it may not be exactly what you think it would be. And as long as your players know ahead of time and you have a good table, I think most people are accommodating.
Precisely. So, well, let's start. And where better to start with, I think where I always start is to just take an existing monster out of the book.
Okay.
The monster manual, I say this 1,000 times. The monster manual is my favorite book in the in all of them. I like all the other variant ones too, but the monster manual I think is personally my favorite. And
Okay.
on top of that, I think legitimately, as I think through the books on my shelf, I think bar none, like one of my favorite books of all time is the monster manual, because I can always take it with me and have fun flipping through and getting inspiration for ideas of stories I want to tell, and unique, basically it's a book of toys, right? It's a
Mhm.
book of toys. It's my toy box. These are all the toys I get to play with as DM. As players, you have all that stuff in the player PHB, that's you. You go to the player's handbook for that. You enjoy your toy box. This is my toy box. And I have toys I want to play with. And I want to see one that looks like something cool. Maybe it's a monster that my players are too weak for. Maybe it's one my players are too strong for. Maybe it's one that, oh, I really like this cool move it has, or in some way, or maybe it inspires me to something else I want to tweak. But the point is, just start with pick the monster first, and then start to bend it around to fit your vision.
Yeah, that's I think that's the easiest thing to do. It's just I do like the monster manual as well. I think there's such a great variety of creatures in there, and you can, depending on what your theme is going for. But as you develop that creature, starting with the monster manual and going, like you said, it's really kind of fun to take a monster and tweak it up or tweak it down depending on what you need.
And I think even more than that, part of what makes the monster manual specifically so nice is a lot of the monsters in it are, I think, some of the most, this sounds like a negative, it's not, but some of the most basic, right? It's a
Right.
lot of the really core archetypes, right? This is your most basic forms of dragons. This is where you find in your ghost, your shadow, your ghoul, your zombie, right? The other books get a little more specified in a direction or a little bit more esoteric. And that's fun, don't get me wrong, but also I think you find a lot of your most broad archetypes within the monster manual itself.
Yes, yeah, that's I think that is absolutely true. The monster manual is the basis, I think, of the majority of the creatures within the world of Forgotten Realms, or the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Is that you start with a monster manual, your basic forms of like dragons, golems,
Mhm.
just all those kind of basics, and even wizards, like your basic NPC characters.
Oh
You
yeah,
can
the
find them,
NPC stat blocks in the back, those are so useful.
very very useful.
So if you want to follow along while you do this, but as an example, let's start by taking a very simple kind of reskinning, which is
Okay.
just to reskin a monster to change its difficulty. So
Mhm.
pick any monster that's in the stat block at all, and then go to the other book you should buy. To me, I say buy this third. You buy the PHB, you buy the monster manual, then you buy the DMG. That's my personal order. But go to the DMG, and specifically if you go to the back at page 274, by the way, we are in 5th edition. The new 1 D&D 5.5 that is not dropped yet. So we're talking about the original 5e, the Sararak on the cover, purple DMG. If you go to page 273, where they have creating monsters, and 274, there is creating quick monster stats. This is one of the most useful tools, I think, Sean, you'll agree, for reskinning, because it's a chart, and it is by CR, which is your difficulty score, or challenge rating is the actual term.
Challenge rating, yeah.
Proficiency bonuses, armor class, HP, attack bonus, and an estimated amount of damage per round. And the reason this is nice is because bare minimum, the most basic reskin, I want a goblin that is CR 20. Cool. I'm going to go to goblin. I'm going to look at everywhere I see stats on him, and I'm just going to see how they do not match the table, and I'm going to make them match the table. And it's not going to be perfect for a couple reasons we'll get into in a second, but just as a starting point, something to work with, it's a great foundational tool.
Yeah, 100%. It's something that every DM should be able to use, and I think it is a great tool. And also, you can any dice. I think we were talking about that on our prep. Anydice.com.
If anyone hasn't used anydice.com, part of it's especially good with this page of the monster manual too, because one other thing the DMG points out is an estimated damage per round. And we'll talk in a second about some of the issues with the CR system, but one of the most important things I find when balancing and keeping my stuff together, and why these stats are important, and the hardest thing to do because it involves a lot of abstract math and theoretical math, not theoretical in the college way, theoretical in the, if they roll this and if they roll this. Anydice.com lets you type in 3d8, and it'll print out a full-on bell curve of the average damage numbers you can expect. And you can tweak it in a lot of different ways to include the stats you get out. But you take this and you take that stat block, and suddenly you have a tool for really understanding how much damage your monsters can pump out in a given turn on average. And again, anyone who's played video games like XCOM will know, average percentages don't mean anything. They are not consistent. They're not predictive of what will happen. But as a starting point, it's so useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, you don't want to kill your players in one round. You don't want to insta kill them because you overbuilt a monster. You felt this would be enough, and it turned out to be more than enough. And using the anydice.com kind of gives you some okay, I want to have this with a D12 worth of damage, or 2D12. What's it going to do? And to have that number in your head, it really helps kind of start that basis out. That's a really smart move.
Yep. Hey, on average, I expect to do half a player's health in a single turn. All right, cool. That communicates a level of the difficulty on average, and then if they get lucky or not. At max, I can kill a player in a single turn, right? If I get the nuts on a crit, those are handy. Also, while you're in the DMG, page 280 has monster features, and this I thought was important to bring up because I think this really shows the precedent again that the creators encourage this type of behavior too. Because what this does is it is a table of existing special abilities or special types of actions that most of the monsters in the monster manual have. At least one monster in the monster manual has. It is the name of the ability. It is a description of what it does to affect the challenge rating by their estimate, and an example monster that it goes on. And again, the idea is, I really like this monster, but I wish it had this ability. Cool. Here's an example of the monster that has the ability where I can find the full text on it. Here's how I can kind of see how it affects the game. Just there for easy access and easy reference for you to build these starting points.
Yeah, because you have to build starting points. You have to be able to have a basis for your creature, and that's a great place. And we'll get more into specialty actions and stuff like that later. But this is more about those special abilities, whether it's take dark vision or blind sight or true sight, or those things you might want to add to your creature that are very simple, but will considerably change the dynamic.
Or pack tactics, if we're looking at goblins and wolves and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also relevant because this is some of the most high-minded. We'll get to some of the more creative stuff in a second. But while we're talking more the business end of things, I think it's really worth just a quick understanding for new DMs. So the CR system is the challenge rating system. It is designed to be a barometer of how difficult a creature is supposed to be. I believe it is a CR. The idea is the CR of that monster should be able to should be an adequate fight for a party of 4 to 5 of the same level. So a CR4 monster should be a challenge for a party of 4 to 5 players.
Right.
I can tell you, and I think if you spend a lot of time on D&D online, will tell you that's often not the case.
No.
And not because the monster's too strong, because it's too weak. Because D&D is built for players to feel empowered.
Absolutely. Just the structure of 5e is designed to make the players feel powerful and give them the opportunity to feel powerful. And yes, by the CR rating, that has to say 4 fourth level characters, she can take on a CR4. They will wipe a CR4 unless you give it some special abilities. They'll wipe that thing out pretty quick.
Yep, absolutely, it will be completely annihilated.
Yeah.
So the question you're probably thinking, especially if you're brand new, is like, okay, well then how do I make it perfectly balanced? I'm gonna tell you, at least my best advice, and Sean, based on your reaction, you can't, right?
You can't.
So like, hey, especially with that conversation we had earlier about the types of players you have. I mean, Sean, what if my monster's too difficult?
It happens. It can be too difficult, but you also, that's as a DM, you have to make some, decisions on the fly to maybe pull something back, remove something that you added that you haven't used yet. That's kind of on you. You will feel that out pretty quick. You always like that, punch in the mouth that makes your players go, oh my goodness, I'm up against something strong, but you don't want to wipe out half of them in that attempt.
Yeah, I think every DM who is in the running to be considered a nice DM. I chose those words carefully. Any DM who's in the running to be considered a nice DM has had the moment where they go to a table very excited for a monster they're running because they read it has some awful ability, like swallows somebody. That's one I use, where it bit the person, it swallows them and ingests them. They're trapped and then they're being digested. I was like, oh man, oh cool. And then they're bummed because the last 3 times they did this, the attack never got off. Like they missed. And so every time they were disappointed. And this time the attack goes off. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait. And then it does way too much damage, or it kills the player. And they have that realization of, I didn't want it to actually kill him or hit them that hard, even though beforehand, like, oh my God, I just wanted to hit them and do damage.
Right. You want that ability to test, because you want to see your player's reaction to that. Oh my goodness, it swallowed him. And now you're restrained, or you're whatever I think it's restrained sometimes. I think grappled. But yeah, that's when you do it and then you go, okay, we're ready to roll damage. You're like, oh man, I maxed out, or oops, and it's happened.
Oh my God.
I crit on this one, right? And you have to take that into account when you build them. You have to have that in your head. What happens if I crit? How much will this possibly do? And again, anydice.com could be very helpful for that.
Yeah. But hey, if it's too difficult, like, it's okay. Either because especially when I was a new DM, I'd say to my players, like, hey, I'm trying to push the difficulty up. I feel like the combats have been too easy. I'm trying to make things harder. FYI, guys, if this ends up being a TPK, I'm calling it now. We will call it a dream sequence. Why? Because I don't want my inexperience as a DM or my experimentation to ruin the story you guys have been building. And my players are receptive to and respect that. Other times, I mean, it's not, if it's not challenging at some points, it's not fun. So it's okay if your monster's more difficult than you expect it to be.
Yeah, and if you use the CR rating as it stands right now, you will never run into that problem. So yes, I always use, when I'm using like D&D Beyond and in their encounter builder, which that needs some help, but it's nice because I would always, a lot of times as you add monsters or add creatures to the encounter, it balance against your party. It'll tell you, mild, deadly, it'll take you all the way up to the different level. And 9 times out of 10, I will always just push it as all the way to deadly. And doesn't really ever seem to affect them.
And then also, I mean, with that, it's also sometimes it's also sometimes okay to have encounters that are too easy. And why? Because you know what? Your players work hard, designing their characters, wanting them to feel powerful. And I'm a DM. We all feel the feeling we all have a little bit of my precious syndrome.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you like have the big boss and you're feeling all confident, like, oh, I got this. Oh, you guys are going to, like, let's go. You get in that playful competitive spirit, and then the players one shot it. If you can look past the tears, what you'll see is your players are often smiling because they feel really cool, and also
Right.
they screwed you over a little bit. But oftentimes it's also because, like, oh my god, like, it worked, I did that. Did you see how strong I am? And, like,
Right.
you can't deny that's a really good feeling for them if you're able to look past, again, your own tears.
True. But I think that it's okay that they do that, and I think you're right
Mhm,
that if players can get that one moment or several moments where they feel empowered, it's nice to set them up in that direction, knowing that maybe, all right, this was kind of easy. The next one won't be. You know what I mean? Like that does come
mhm.
into play, but it isn't
So
you against them. Ultimately, you have to
yeah,
realize it's not you against them.
have to keep throwing that out there. It is not.
Yes.
It is not. It is. We will let it never be said that we're a podcast that supports DMs
No.
against players.
Yeah. No. It's
That's
not
next
fun.
episode.
What happens when you go against your players? Yeah, that can be
Right.
an interesting topic.
So,
Comment,
well,
people comment if you want us to talk about that. That'd be fun yeah, I would like to see that.
that'll
Uh,
get more traction than the question of the episode.
yeah. You want to see a DM? What's our take on DMs versus players?
I'm not, so we're clear we're not doing that episode.
No, we're not. No, I'm just kidding.
But all right, cool. So we talked the mechanics, we talked some of the business side of things. Let's get creative. Sean, what's so we have our starting point, right? So
All
we
right.
have a monster we picked. We've looked at the DMG for some of the stats. We've looked at any dice as well to kind of reel that in. We have had our emotional preparedness for our difficulty checks. Now, okay, what's something that an area that you start to tweak when you are reskinning a monster for any purpose you've got?
A lot of times, the first thing I will look at is possibly, let's just say, a lair action. If they find
Oh,
themselves
sure.
in its lair, I love lair actions. I think they're great. You can use. I use them a couple different ways. I use them much like legendary. You can put them in between turns, between player turns, or another one I like to do is just an initiative count. Okay, an initiative count 15 or initiative count 20. This happens, and a lair action sometimes can be a buildup, especially like let's use this example. Volcanic environment at an initiative count 20, the floor starts to erupt, lava
Mhm.
bursts. It's to come out randomly, and
because
you
because for our people who are also a little bit newer to this and not familiar, lair actions are a tool that are typically given, as Sean said. Usually they trigger on initiative 20, and the idea is they're meant to represent the location of the battle. Most thematically, it's like, oh, it's the monster's lair. If the monster's particularly magical, it has some kind of impact on the lair itself. But you
right.
can even stretch that to just be, it's a hazardous environment. Maybe you're having a fight in the middle of an avalanche. So on
Hmm.
initiative 20, a boulder comes rolling by, and everyone, not just the monster, has to dodge it. But
Right.
conceptually, a lair is it's an action for the fight attached to the monster that is thematically attached to the location.
Yeah, it's designed to create a little bit more dynamic and get away from the you
Mhm.
them balance. That can get a little monotonous and can turn your fight into a slog. So, yeah, layer actions are always fun. They're similar to legendary actions. It's another thing you can kind of add to a creature that may not normally have them, but if it fits your theme, like,
Mhm.
ultimately.
A great example of this might be, even if you have a boss fight with some kind of, a wizard in his fortress, and in his lair, his main laboratory, and he has several, I don't know, pylons that are feeding him energy. And so every start of every initiative, if the pylons are up, they heal a certain amount of damage, as an example, right? That would be a
Yeah.
lair action. And
Hmm.
then that, not only does it create something that's unique to the theming of the location and adds more theme to the monster, the fight, based on location itself, but it also adds, again, a mechanical incentive for the players to not just target the wizard, bring him down. Like, no, target the pylons, they're healing him. It
Right.
again, just a small twist without adding much. But that's literally a single ability to add to something, and yet the possibility to change it and make it so unique are endless off of just that.
Absolutely. That's kind of like my favorite part is when they're going up against your bad guy for the end fight, to be able to add that layer of lair action and
That layer of
Sometimes,
layer.
yeah, layer of layer. So you just layer it in of layering layer actions. It'd be kind of fun. But it is, yeah, that's like, to me, that's one of the easiest ways to change your fight a bit and add a little bit more dynamics to it.
Legendary actions are also really cool. They're
Yeah.
typically
Yeah.
used for really difficult and challenging, like big named people. These are the one you want to have your boss fights. But the thing about legendaries as well that is they're a great way to tweak up and increase the challenge and make a monster feel particularly unique, because now instead of it being in the regular flow of a battle where like, okay, well, the players get to take all their turns, and then because they took all their turns, my monster didn't get to do anything because they blew them up in one hit.
Right.
Legendary actions are actions that a monster will get to take after anyone else has taken their action. So
Correct.
they're just free extra things you do. So, oh, the barbarian ran in range and hit the bad guy really hard. And we got 3 more people in the line. Okay, cool. Well, as a legendary action, he gets to take a range shot against someone far away
Right.
or teleport somewhere else. So he's not
Mhm.
engaged in combat. And now it's not now the players are still having to adapt even along a single round of combat, even though it's just one person. Again, just such a small tweak.
Yeah, that's, to me, the legendary actions. I run into them more when you deal with dragons, because they always seem to have some, on top of their legendary resistance. I don't normally would add like a legendary resistance to a non-legendary creature. I mean, I find that would almost imbalance them in the wrong way. But yeah, sometimes that's also a fun little thing to tweak in, is to give them some resistance, maybe not 5 or 3, like 1 or 2, is a way to add a little bit more dynamics to their abilities.
Right, because again, the fundamental idea we're talking here is, you're taking an existing monster that is in the book, whatever book it is, Monster
Mhm.
Manual, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, any of these, and you are just by adding a couple small tweaks to it, be it these special types of actions, changing some of the stats in some way, you are making something entirely new, or if not entirely new, entirely customized to the purpose you're trying to do.
Ye
Another way I love doing it is with just a simple retheme, like really a thematic retheme. One of the most
Mhm.
basic ones to do is just change the damage type of it, right? Instead of
Right.
having zombies, throw fire damage on everything the zombies do, and an immunity to fire, and maybe some kind of AoE effect. And then boom, these are like special undead crawling out of, I don't know, some burning village,
Mhm.
or maybe these are explorers who've been to this volcano before rising up from the magma. Just such a
Yeah.
small tweak. And again, all I'm doing in that case is taking the zombie stat block, putting some fire crap on it, and then boom, I have fire zombies and a unique encounter to my players.
Yeah, well, a good example too of that, that is, yeah, great. Just adding one little thing that's different for that creature or creature types, changing the damage type, is a fantastic way to do it. One of the things I did in one of my last games is I added the weapon that this particular zombie, this giant zombie, was using, was a person. And I said, it'd be kind of interesting if I added to this fight and called him the Wailing Dead, and it's just screaming the entire time. And as it screams, it's causing psychic damage. So even if it misses you, it's near you. If it swings by you, it can affect. It's like an area of effect as it's moving the weapon around. I always thought that was fun.
Even small changes can help, not just for like an elemental twist to it, or a like physiology change, but these kinds of retheming ideas can also help to indicate a cohesion of, say, an organization or a group. A
True.
basic one might be, maybe you have a bunch of wizards who are all, use dark, corrupted magic. They're tainted by something. And so, similar to the super soul, I forget what the actual term for them was, but if anyone's seen Iron Man 3, the guys who were using Extremis, the chemical
Right.
drug or whatever to make them really strong, whenever they would die, they exploded in this big fiery burst.
Right.
Cool. Well, any of these wizards are exploding when they die in a burst of necrotic energy. So then when the players have some kind of encounter or see some kind of clue to, an explosion and withering dead coming from it, like, oh, they're part of the cult. Oh, like I have a connection there. Or if you really want to mess with your players, give them all shape changers. Make
Yeah.
every single monster or enemy some kind of doppelganger and or mimic. So you never know if that person, or if you played like the Prey video game from a couple years ago, if that coffee mug is
Hmm.
really the spy you've been chasing this entire time.
True that. And you can also do things like they all have wings. Just adding wings to creatures that don't normally have wings creates a whole different dynamic for them. I think that's always fun.
They're all
You know,
incorporeal, ghosty undead who can
right.
float and are resistant to regular damage.
Yeah, that's a fabulous way to just spice up a character or spice up your monster just a little bit, and it's not that much to do.
Actually, on that note, I just had this thought. Yeah, if you want a good example of reskinning the same thing over and over again with slightly different variants, just go to Pirates of the Caribbean. Because what was it? We had actual undead with the Black Pearl. We had
Hmm.
sea ones with Davy Jones's crew. I
Yep.
forget. Well, I forget. What was it? We had. Well, three is we've still got Davy Jones's crew, but hey, we've got the East India Trading Company.
Hmm.
Well, four is Blackbeard's crew. I don't know their gimmicks, so I'm gonna skip it. And then you've got the fifth one, which with Javier Bardem, where they're like the weird kind of like parts of them are missing, floaty, ethereal ghost
Hmm.
pirates. Like
Yeah.
all of those are pirates. And if you look at those watch those movies and see the differences in how some of them fight and how some of them are portrayed, you can easily start to see how you can go and find, like, I think there's a swashbuckler stat block, I'm sure, in the monster manual, or if not,
Hmm.
find the bandit, the thug, any of these,
Right.
add a couple little tweaks to them, and then you have a whole new story to tell.
Right. You have a whole new avenue, especially pirates are great for that. And that you can just thematically go in a bunch of different directions. And you said you could add ghost abilities or shape changers. That's a fun one. The doppelgangers or the mimics are a great tool.
It's fun for the DM. It's not fun for the players, but again,
No,
it's not us versus them.
no, it's not supposed to be.
And again, if you're thinking, well, I don't know, like, should I, like, can I? Again, you have our permission as the host of the Vanguard Chronicles. We give you our express permission.
Yes.
We'll sort it out with Chris Perkins. We'll
Yeah.
we'll talk it out with them. We'll handle it there.
Chris can come on the show and we can talk
Yeah,
about it at great
yeah.
length. I think,
Chris
yeah.
Perkins can come on the show,
Anyone who
but
knows Chris, tell him that he can come on our show and talk about it.
absolutely, and we'll yes. But they also do that in their own books too. One of the, again, basic examples: go to the back of the monster manual, go to the back of the of Volos. You'll find
Mhm.
all the different NPC stat blocks are basically just reskins on different types of human or elf, depending.
Mhm.
If you go to Volo's guide, Volo's was huge for this because
Mhm.
look at the section on Cobalt. You've got, what was the Cobalt Dragon Shield, the
Mhm.
Cobalt Inventor, and
Yep.
the Cobalt Scale Sorcerer. All of these are different takes on the Cobalt that still fundamentally a Cobalt,
Right.
but are just making tweaks to giving it a different ability, different weapon, just changing it in some way so that, again, you can have a group of Cobalts and use the basic stats, but you then have these unique modeled ones that you can get a different story out of or a different kind of combat encounter out of.
True that. And you can also another great thing is go to the player's handbook and use some spells from there that you can just suddenly give them the ability to cast spells. I've done that several times. That they're a necromancer or they're a kobold and they're just it's just a kobold, but now he's a kobold necromancer. He has some extra stuff to do. There's more stuff he can actually apply.
Perfect. Oh my god, like, hey, you know what? Maybe a mad scientist, you're running like Eberron or something, or you're doing a
Hmm.
more steampunk feel, and he's created some kind of magitite mech from that has, I don't know, an ice bomb ability. Cool.
Hmm.
Reskin spells. Fireball. Take fireball, make it ice damage, and then use those stats for then an ice explosion ability of some kind.
Hmm.
Boom. You've created a unique ability, a unique spell for your players if you really want, but a unique ability that you then put onto some other existing monster that you want to theme up with an ice theme. And
Hmm.
and now an entirely new or unique fight and experience that they won't be expecting with a set of precedent. Oh, and if you don't know the numbers to use, go to the DMG and balance accordingly.
Right. You have this. The tools are there. Just use them to balance out your fight. But that's a great way to do it. I love to convert the fireball or the fireball mentality into an acid or to another damage type, depending on the creature that they're fighting, because it just changes the dynamic. It makes it a little bit more interesting. It takes the boring side out of it. I think to a certain degree.
Yep. And you can add things to make it more difficult. You can take away things to make it less difficult. Another easy one. Geez, there's so many resources you can find. Just a couple off the top of our head from third party, because obviously we talked a lot about Wizards of the Coast. If you want really unique special abilities or monsters as your starting points, Kobold Press has their Tome of Beasts series, as well as the Creature Codex. MCDM Productions with Matt Colville has a couple books actually, but the most recent one he did was Flea Mortals, which also really has a lot of cool tools for doing different variants and tweaks on the same kinds of existing monsters. Pardon me. We've got Path of the Planebreaker as just an example. That was Monty Cook Games version of Planescape, as I recall. So kind of exploring with some different planar types of creatures as starting points, or anything else they produce. And then even Dice Dungeons not too long ago dropped Mutated Monsters. They even sold with that like a bunch of cards with just special abilities of, hey, this monster can regen. Oh, it can separate limbs. Oh, it can do that. And just ways to, again, tweak existing monsters to add a whole new level of theme to them is what that book specialized in particular.
Yeah, and there's another one that I read early on as a DM was The Monsters Know What They're Doing.
Perfect.
That's a great book to figure out, at least have a basis on how some monsters are going to fight, and then that gives you ideas on how to apply them and reskin a monster's fighting style. Whether like we're talking pack tactics for that wolves have, giving them to goblins or kobolds or other creatures that can use that as just a means to make your fight more dynamic.
And then even if that's too far, go to old editions of D&D. Like, the rules have changed over the years, and don't get me wrong, some things won't directly translate as well, but just looking for inspiration is sometimes all you need. One of those basic ones is 4th edition had, I believe, the minion system, which, don't quote me on this, but it was basically a way of handling mob fights such that instead of, I think it was like, if you dealt any damage to a minion, it would just auto kill it. Or if I'm wrong, it was any 2 hits would auto kill it of some kind. And then on top of that, just so many monsters have changed their stats in so many ways, gained or lost abilities over time. There's plenty of resources to dig through.
Absolutely. But you can also quote Nathan in the comments, please. Quote him on that one. I would have been more fun that way. But in the comments, put it in the comments, because we're going to hold him to this. No, you're right. The other editions, I know I've pulled creatures, and we're going to talk about them in a bit in some of our examples. Whether I pulled them out of, I think it was 2nd edition. They were a fun creature then, but they really never transferred over to 5e. So I couldn't find a 5e version of them. So I went back and found it in 2e, and it was actually really interesting and fun. That was something unexpected for the players. It's not a reference they would normally look for.
Yeah, well, actually, the heck with later. Let's do it now. Let's start with some examples.
Okay, well, you can. One of my favorites, and I'll actually start there, since we were talking about taking a creature from a different edition, was the Phaerimm. In a brief description, the Phaerimm they were like these malevolent plant-like creatures that fought the Netherese and they're really arrogant, and they love to make humans suffer. So I took that creature and then said, how does it apply to this game, in the game I was writing? And so they drain magic from people, and they don't really do a lot of physical damage as much as what I added to tweak this up a bit is that they steal spell slots. If you fail your saving throw and get caught in its deadlights, you will lose a spell slot.
Oh, I bet your players love that.
Oh yeah, they were like, that was so good. No, definitely.
Barbarians didn't have a problem, but yeah, I bet.
Well, the interesting thing is, because that first question was forever. Like, was this permanent? Like, and then you look at him, and you don't want to be mean, but you go, you don't know. You don't know. But no, in that creature, they would get it after a long rest. They would get their spell slot back. But during the fight, they would lose their highest level spell slot. Gone. See ya. And that changes the dynamics of your fight immediately. Because a lot of times, like we talk about, players go all out. They want to take it down, and they want to feel powerful. And if you just remove that, and they're not doing a lot of damage, like you're not losing hit points, you're just losing an ability.
That's also a really interesting one too, because I know one thing that I always forget with balance sometimes is I'll see that I did no damage to the players, and I'll think, man, that fight was so easy. But when I talk to the players, they're like, oh my God, that fight was so hard. And the reason was because even though I'm only looking at damage, they're looking at the reason they took no damage is because they used every spell slot perfectly.
Mhm.
They prioritized their targets. They used all their one-time use abilities. And so, yes, they took no physical damage, but they need to long rest or they will take all the physical damage next time.
Right, they
So it is
exhausted everything.
right. So it has created this tension that of like, oh yeah, we avoided disaster, but like let's be clear. Another way to put it is like, yeah, we jumped and no, we didn't die, but we did have to use our parachute. And
Right.
the next step was our backup parachute. This analogy is falling apart, but the point is, right? We've used our critical resource that is
Right,
keeping us alive. We have nothing else to help us.
right, right.
So if that fight had kept going, we were scared because it almost went really bad.
Yeah, the idea again is resource management, and you want to challenge your resources, make them use resources ahead of time to try to get them imbalanced, so they have to use them differently. That is always fun, and like I said with the Phaerimm, I gave it a couple lair actions. It had the walls had overgrown because it was living in this one area. It had overgrown with vines, and the vines were animated, and they'd reach out and grab players, just so it didn't turn into this was just chasing the wizards down, the barbarian and the rogue and other people within the combat encounter had things to do and had things to overcome. So it became a little bit more fun back and forth, I think, with them. Other than stealing spell slots, they didn't like that.
What's also funny to me is obviously I think you and I tend to lean I tend to really lean into mechanics as a priority. I think you tend to lean to story as a priority.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
that I don't care a lot about story nor that you don't care a lot about mechanics, but I think
Right.
just that's tends to be the ways that we lean on one side of the spectrum.
Mhm.
I think it's funny. Your first example is clearly a very mechanical one. For me, it's a story one.
Okay.
Um, Goblins. I
Okay.
mean, come on, guys. Like goblins are in every single game, and I challenge any DM who's listening to this who wants to run D&D for the first time. I challenge you to run goblins, but to run them in a way that your players will find new. Like one of the most basic things you can do with goblins, I'll put it two ways. One, don't call them goblins. Give them a fly speed because they have wings. Some kind of give them firebolt, a cantrip as well from the PHB, which we talked
Yep.
about earlier, right?
Yep.
Give them fire immunity, fire resistance. You have now a new kind of really annoying impish that can be an elemental, that can be a demon, that can be a devil, whatever you want to call it. It is now give it all the personality of the goblin, but just these small tweaks. And now it's, or just call it a goblin. It's a fire goblin. They live in a volcano or in the elemental
Mhm.
plane. And all this time of goblins in the elemental plane has warped them somehow. So they're imbued with fire. Take that, put any other element on it. And you either then have, a new type of goblin or a new type of non-goblin enemy, or go the other direction with it and make, do what the monster manual literally does in the back. They have zombies, zombie ogres, zombie beholders. Give me zombie goblins, right?
Yeah.
And so now play off the idea that they're undead. What kind of awful thing happened, or maybe way too brutal group of adventurers explored the cave before you came in that left so many goblins to turn undead around
Mhm.
here? So many implications you can get into, either by again taking the stat block and turning it into something entirely new that's not a goblin,
Right.
or taking the stat block and tweaking it to make goblins interesting in a brand new way. Clockwork goblins, mechanical. Someone said I can build a better goblin.
Yeah, that's actually funny. But yeah, that's a great way to reskin and change what has been, a standard monster, a standard creature in the game, and giving it some new fun. Another thing you can do, and we talk about elementals. I had taken a creature in one of our games, and it started out by design. It was a fire elemental. And I'm like, that might be a little over, for these players for what they're going to encounter. So I toned it a bit, but I also kind of combined it with a dire wolf, and then it became a dire wolf shaped fire elemental. And I gave it a couple little small lair actions to add dynamics to the fight, but and that actually turned out to be a pretty good fight all the way around because there was so many other factors going on at the time. But I made him kind of super powerful because in this story, I knew a second group of adventurers were going to arrive and kind of continue the fight, so that it would turn out to be that this super powerful thing was getting beat up, and then the other group showed up to kind of finish the job, so that I wouldn't TPK the party.
And that's an example of one that you gave some lair actions to as well. Am I right?
Yeah, one of my favorite ones was that at initiative count 20, he the fire elemental would just burst into flame. It sent a shockwave of energy across the entire, and you either make a saving throw, a dexterity saving throw to take half damage to get the hell out of the way of it. But it was a way to kind of restructure the battlefield a bit and push everybody in a different way. I mean, they didn't see it coming.
I bet if you want to make that more difficult, I know if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 4th edition fire dragons had just a damage over time effect, which was no save. Just if you are in range of it, you take damage every single turn. Probably too strong for your players, but a small tweak that you could even make to make it scale up to higher level players.
Right. And again, the idea of their lair is that they know it. The creature is intimate with where they live, so it would have an advantage over anyone just showing up and attempting to kind of infiltrate that lair.
I know I just mentioned a minute ago, the other one I love to do, and I tell you I use all the time. Sean, do you know what my most used dragon is?
Well, according to our show notes, it will be the white dragon Wyrmling.
Yeah, let me tell you something. If you're a new DM who's running a low-level campaign, the white dragon Wyrmling is your best friend for creating your own stories. And the reason I say the white dragon Wyrmling is for 2 reasons. One, in general, the game is called Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And as a result, I think too many times the starter adventures that people might run for their games, like we got Goblins, but it's not called Goblins or Dungeons and Goblins. It's not called anything with Goblins. It's called Dungeons and Dragons. Right. And dragons are such a challenging foe sometimes that it's kind of hard to find one that fits. And a thing to remember from the monster manual is all of those stat blocks as well, they represent an average, a typical dragon of this type. Right. But if you look at dragons, they're scaled from Wyrmling to young to adult to ancient.
Right.
It's not, this dragon hits this age and they magically grow in size and gain extra health and deal more damage. They grow over time.
Right.
So it would stand to reason that some dragons are stronger, some dragons are weaker, both at the same age range, though. So the reason I like the white dragon Wyrmling is he's the lowest statted dragon in the monster manual.
Right.
As a result of this, he can be reskinned as any other kind of dragon. If I want a red dragon Wyrmling, that's a CR4. White dragon Wyrmling is CR2. I know what we said about CR. It is a little more accurate at lower levels because the players are just weaker in general. Right. But now, if I want to have level 1, level 2 players, and I want to run a red dragon, then I'm going to take the white dragon. I'm going to switch all its ice-related stuff to fire. And what do you know? I have a slightly weaker than average CR2 red dragon Wyrmling, or gold dragon, silver dragon, blue dragon, any of the new ones that are in some of the newer books. Boom, I have what I need for a dragon stat block without changing anything but just the elements.
Yeah, that's just one of the simplest ways. That's a great tool to use, is to look at your CR and say, okay, well, we did say CR is a bit subjective, but you can use that as a starting point again with anything. Yeah.
Any other cool thing about this trick, Sean?
What?
It goes. We record these episodes live. It goes the other direction too, because if I want to have a white dragon that is, gold dragon level of difficulty, right, I can use the exact same premise. Right. And again, if I want to tweak it in one way or the other, maybe I want this to be a particularly hard white dragon Wyrmling fight. Cool. Then maybe I look at the legendary actions that the ancient white dragon has, scale them down with some of the stats from, again, the DMG, all of these tools you see wrap around on themselves. And again, I'm able to take this simple encounter and just give it just a little bit of little sauce, right? Just a little bit of a twist to it to make it much more interesting and unique for my players.
True. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. And I think we've covered quite a bit in this episode on different ways that you can reskin creatures and where you can reskin them and why you reskin them. I think we've covered quite a bit today.
I think we've also very much pointed out how, this is all technically homebrewing, but I mean, this is cheating. Hence why we also said this is how to cheat at homebrew.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's cheating, and if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
So, it's also cool timing with this episode is we're actually recording this before you go and do a little bit of traveling. And the reason I say I think it's related is you're about to go on several planes. Yes. Which is fitting because our next topic will be about the planes and planar travel and adventures.
Okay. Good connection. Well done.
Thank you kindly.
Way to
That will
connect
not
that
be the
dot.
bumper for the next episode.
No,
Actually,
but
that
way to
might be the
connect that
bumper next
dot.
episode.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit of traveling here for work coming up, but yeah. So yeah, the next that should be a fun topic to talk about how the planes relate not only to our world within the Vanguard, can be very interesting, but how you can build on planar adventures and what they mean and how you can explore them. That'll be fun.
We're recording first, and one more peek behind the scenes. We're recording this. We're recording that episode probably about a month from now, and I've already thought to myself, just I'm calling it now. When you listen to the next episode, let's just see if in a month, if I make the joke in the bumper, we just recorded a whole episode on planes, and boy, are our arms tired, or another terrible joke to that effect. But we'll
All right, yeah,
let you keep listening to find that one out.
yeah. Let's definitely check out if he remembers to do that. I don't know if he will. That'll be kind of funny. So what do
So,
we got? What do we got for the question here? I'm curious how we're gonna
aside
get
from what
out.
the bumper is next month, no, the question of this episode is so we talked a lot about reskinning and changing up, and hopefully we've gotten a lot of creative juices and ideas flowing. It's the reason that I love talking about monsters and looking through the monster manual, and I know Sean feels the same way. But what's a cool way that you would tweak or reskin an existing monster to tell a unique story using any of the techniques we've listed, or even your own techniques? We just want to know, hey, point to something in the book and or something in some other book, and tell us how you would change it to make something entirely new. So that way I can copiously steal it for session so that way other players can use it.
Yes, that's exactly what we were going to do, and realize that in future episodes when we start talking about your ideas in our games, and you'll know where they came from. Just so
Yep.
you know. But yeah, please like, subscribe, hit the notification. We kind of harp on that a bit, but it does definitely help us kind of push push this channel up so more people can see it and hopefully enjoy it.
Yeah, we have as much fun creating this as we hope you do creating new monsters. So thank you all for
Yeah.
listening.
Yep. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya. Thank you for watching the Vanguard Chronicles podcast. If you want to read more about the adventures of our players and our ongoing campaign, or even read some of their dispatches, you can find them at vanguardguild.fandom.com. If you want to support our charity with Extra Life, you can go to their website and search for the Vanguard. And of course, if you want to support us directly, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, and answer that question of the week. Thank you again for listening to the Vanguard Chronicles, and we'll see you on the next one.